Good evening. It's Tuesday afternoon, approximately 8:15 on August the 26th. I'm continuing my series with chapter 8 of the Bhagavad Gita, and this is a detailed explanation of the chapter. My name is James Exum. My yoga name is Sakshi, which means the witness. And this will be a continuation of the 18 chapters. This will be chapter number 9. I believe that's right. Let me double check myself. No, I'm sorry, this is chapter number 8. Forgive me. So we start with Arjuna, who is in the chariot with Lord Shiva as his charioteer, his driver. And Arjuna is still despondent, and he's still trying to learn all he can from his teacher, Lord Krishna, about how to deal with the battle that's about to happen in front of the both of them, which is the great battle, which involves part of his family and friends and teachers and etc. So we'll start off with what Arjuna asked of Lord Krishna. He asked him first, what is Brahman? What is the self? What is karma? And what is the material world? And lastly, he asked, what is the divine principle? Well, that's a lot of questions. And these are all couched in existential uncertainty, which basically mirrors all of our questions and our quest while we're dealing with the turbulence of the human lifespan. So these can come across also not as personal questions between Arjuna, the great archer, and Lord Krishna, the great teacher. These can come across as questions that are relevant even today. Of course, this is from the Bhagavad Gita. It was written by Vyasa, and I've already explained that in other videos, so hopefully you've learned all of this, so I won't be repeating much of that this time. So these questions mirror my quest for moksha, for liberation, your quest, anyone that's on the true path of yoga that is seeking liberation within this lifetime. These questions are in direct parallel with our questioning minds on the same subjects. So the concise answers come as this. Brahman is the supreme imperishable being. He is supreme. He's imperishable. The self is the individual self. Karma is the action originating from creation. It's much more, but these are basic definitions. And the divine principle is the perishable physical, is the cosmic spirit. And the perishable physical world is the material world. I have those out of order, but those are still the answers to his questions. The most important one being the perishable physical world is not the cosmic spirit world. These are Gita's perennial themes of temporality, duty, transcendence, convergence, and setting the stage for deeper metaphysical explorations that we will go into and have gone into so far. Well, not the deeper ones, but we have gone into them, the basic portions of those. So in chapter 8 is a very important chapter in a sense. I keep always saying certain sentences are important or chapters are important, so I'm going to try to get away from it. Try to, excuse me, try to get away from that. You'll excuse me, I have Parkinson's, and it affects my vocal cords and my facial gestures and my arm and hand movements sometimes, and even brings on that cough you just heard. I'm sorry about that. But at least I'm able to teach and able to take care of my own home and so forth. So the 8th chapter pivots on the assertion that the soul, when absorbed in remembrance of the divine at the moment of death, obtains liberation, moksha, I mentioned that a moment ago. This teaching, both solemn and liberating, directs the seeker to cultivate an unwavering devotion, bhakti, and a mental discipline, which is another definition of yoga, so that one's final thoughts become a portal to eternity. There's an old saying, your last thought. Well, I've changed that saying a little bit. I say your last thought is your last chance. If you're not thinking about the Creator in your last thoughts, then your chances of reaching moksha are lower by a great percentage. So this exposition in the chapter does not merely indulge in metaphysical speculation. It is a practical roadmap for sadhana, spiritual practice, well, obviously. The repeated exhortation to fix the mind upon Krishna, renouncing distractions and desires, points to the centrality of attention and intention in liberation. Thus, chapter 8 becomes a meditation on mortality, not as a terminus, not as just an endpoint, but as a threshold to the imperishable Brahman. Very, 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 that's a very good point. The unity of Atman, the individual soul, and Brahman, the universal soul, for our co-commentator in my papers, I chose Shankara, his classic commentaries to help interpret each one of these chapters, and I also put in my own personal commentaries because I am a yogi and I am a philosopher, and I do write papers on various yoga principles and subject matter. So I share my paper with his opinions and my opinions. So Sankara, and again, you can just look him up. I'm not going to go into any great explanations about him tonight, but remember, he is the most important commentator of yoga philosophy in the history of the writings of yoga. So he says that the imperishable, which in Sanskrit is akshara, is none other than Brahman, pure consciousness, untainted by time, form, or causality. Shankara's gloss on the Gita's 8th chapter de-emphasizes ritual action and eternal observations. Instead, he focuses on jnana, which is knowledge, of course, and the realization that the individual self is already the supreme. This becomes a paradox if you don't know the higher philosophy of yoga, but again, this has been reviewed several times, so I'm not going to go into it in this chapter. If you've heard my earlier chapters on this subject on the Gita, the full explanations of the chapters, not the truncated ones I did also as an earlier series, you'll know what this means. If not, you can just look it up easily in Yogapedia or Wikipedia. He works with a literal interpretation. He does not see liberation as contingent solely on the final moment, but as the fruit of a life lived in steadfast contemplation. Well, nowadays that's not going to work very well, is it? In the days of Shankara, where monks were monks and men were men, and if you were an intellectual, then you were being taken care of by the locals or by a group of individuals that were backing you, so to speak, as far as your daily needs, and all that was an easy thing to accomplish. But who amongst us today has that comfort and that capability? Few, I would say, very few. And it seems as the political times change and as the economic times change right along with them, almost like they're conjoined in a sense, it's getting rougher and rougher as the days pass. I'm not getting into politics here or economics. I'm just simply stating a fact. This is my opinion. He goes on to talk about he does not see liberation as contingent solely on the final moment, but is the fruit of a life lived in steadfast contemplation. Sorry about the redundancy. The deathbed remembrance, in his view, is symbolic of lifelong spiritual discipline. Now, spiritual discipline is a good thing. That I agree on. But remember, yoga is not a religion, it's a science. I call it the science of life, the science of living. It is not a religion. Shankara, now the Hindus utilize yoga in their Hindu religion, but I'm not a Hindu, and I doubt many of my American listeners are followers of the Hindu religion as far as daily practitioners. Now, they may have been born into Hinduism, and there's nothing, I'm not saying anything against any religion, including Hinduism. I'm just saying I'm viewing it from a yogic viewpoint, and as a yogi philosopher, to me, it's science I'm following. Philosophy is totally different than religious theory or religious practice. Shankara's reading thus makes chapter 8 a treatise on the primacy of knowledge and the illusionary nature of death and difference. His key points, and when I read these off, if I say verse 8.5, that means in the 8th chapter, and the verse would be number 5. 8 is the chapter, 0.5 is the verse, or 5 after the point is the verse. And I'll quote it. Whoever at the time of death leaves the body remembering me attains my being. Shankara interprets remember me as constant abidance in the knowledge of Brahman, not as a last-minute recollection. Well, again, we're in modern times, so this is where, remember I said I put his commentary in here, which is his opinion, the ancient classical opinion, and I put my commentary in here as a modern commentator, philosopher commentator, yogi, with years, decades of experience in these texts, in the reading and the contrasting, and so forth. So my opinion is more modern times, up to date. Not that his is old-fashioned, but the world he lived in compared to our world would appear as old-fashioned. The electronics, the computer age, and all the discoveries since his time and period. He was about 8th century CE. Of course, we're a lot further along than that. So the next quote is verse 8, the last one was at verse 8.5, and you're welcome to download a volume of the Bhagavad Gita and learn your way through these verses and through these chapters, and even read along with me or read along in your chapter as I'm giving my I wrote this, so I'm basically reading from my own writing. I'm not using cliff notes or cheating in any way, shape, or form, and even at the end of most of these, all of these, in fact, I give a list of sources and references. I won't necessarily read them to you each time, but they are there for historical reasons and to make sure that I gave credit where credit was due. I did not purloin or steal any of this information from anyone. It's my research brought this about. So the next one is verse 8.13, uttering the one syllable, Om, and meditating on me. Now he's talking about Krishna here is an avatar of Shiva. Shiva can be seen as monotheistic, but generally he's part of the Trimurti, the three gods. But again, that's very complicated. And once you're in deep, once you've waded deep into the waters of yoga philosophy and yoga knowledge, then you'll be at a more receptive level than you may be at this point. But nonetheless, this is what he's saying. And he's talking about meditating on me, obtain the supreme goal. He suggested the primal sound, is a direct pointer to Brahman. Meditation on dissolves the boundaries between self and absolute. Well, again, I'm not ruling any of this out. I'm just saying, for me, it's more of a personal journey to utilize the atman, the soul, which is the little voice within you that's on loan to your body, the spark of divinity, it's on loan to your body from the creator, Brahman. To me, that's the route I have gone to try to get closer to my God, to my creator. I don't necessarily utilize but then again, there's several different types of yoga. You must remember this. Several different classes of yoga, several different areas of yoga. There's karma yoga, there's bhakti yoga, devotion, yoga of action. There's several of them. So choose the one that, or combinations of ones that suit you best. I've chosen karma yoga, and I've also chosen jnana yoga. Jnana is wisdom yoga. Okay. Now my perspective on this. Now we finished with his. Now my perspective on this is I highlight the existential anxiety woven through Arjuna's questions and Krishna's responses. I mentioned that Vyasa's narrative is not merely prescriptive but dialogical. The conversation invites every reader into the circle of inquiry. Well, I mentioned this a moment ago, and that's what it does. Into the circle of inquiry. I interpret the chapter's stress on the moment of death as a metaphor for the constant presence of transition in life. The final thought is emblematic of the mind's tendency to cling, shape, and direct experiences. I live life more through experience than ritual. And there's very much a key difference between the great Shankara and the humble Sakshi. That is my yoga name. It means the witness. It also means the self. It also means the conscience. It also means that little voice that whispers to you and tries to keep you on the right path. In chapter 8, a psychology of attention, where salvation is not a supernatural event, but a product of mindful awareness. Again, I'm rather modern. I also explored the ethical dimensions, how the Gita's teachings on karma and action challenges the reader to live responsibly, knowing that every act shapes your consciousness. Every act shapes your consciousness. You can rewind these or use the words appearing on the screen by pushing that little button to get it to do that if you need more insight. The more insights from my perspective, the inclusivity of the Gita, the path of devotion, bhakti, knowledge, jnana, and action, karma. Well, I've mentioned all these, and here they are in my text, are not mutually exclusive, but are from a spectrum for spiritual evolution. This is like a mixture. This is a beautiful blend that works for me and may work for you. You have to choose your own path, of course. There are parallels between the Gita's vision of imperishable reality and Western philosophical inquiries into being and time as presented in my philosophy of yoga, which is an ongoing series on YouTube of presentations. I advocate reading chapter 8 as a practice of existential readiness, a call to live each moment as if it were your last, suffused with presence and intention. Now there's comparative discourse here. His insistence on the primary of knowledge of reader renders the chapter a hymn to self-realization. This goes very deep and very ankle deep. You're going into the weeds. I went into the weeds here. If you're reading this text, that's wonderful, but if you're trying to hear it, it would really get us bogged down. And I do not intend to use up this 30, I'm giving just about 30 odd minutes. I'm not going to get us bogged down because otherwise I'll be spending so much time explaining each little section of these two paragraphs. So we're going to move now forward to the, well, I'll give you I take that back. I shouldn't be, I'm not trying to gloss over anything. Let me just go through it and I'll try to discipline myself not to get lost in the weeds. That's my problem, not yours. Okay, so let me go ahead and read it as written. Shankara's insistence on the primacy of knowledge renders the chapter for him self-realization. My focus on psychological and ethical readiness reframes it as a guide to living and dying well. Well, we both have our points, and we're both looking at it from our personal historical points of view. You have to understand, when I'm in contrast to Shankara's commentaries, I'm not going against the great man, because he is one of my he is one of my teachers, just like Swami Satchidananda, who passed away here a few years ago, the guru of Woodstock. He was one of the founders, if not the founder, of integral yoga, and he also has still, even though he's gone, he also has still ongoing YouTube presentations. I'm not against any of my fellow yogis, swamis, gurus. I'm none of those. I'm just a simple yogi. That's the bottom of the ladder, basically, except for just being a student or a seeker. I'm way down at the bottom, but I am a student of yoga philosophy, so that kind of gives me a little bit of rank, but if you can call it rank, it gives me a little bit of authority, is what it gives me, over the text and the interpretations of the text. It doesn't give me authority in any other sense. I mean, I'm not out for popularity. I'm out for publication, and I'm also out for presentation. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to, in the last years of my life, I'm about to turn 75, September 30th. I know y'all are tired of hearing that, but I am, and I thought to myself here a short while back before I started this series, I thought to myself, well, you know, you're not here forever, old boy, so you might want to get busy and spread what you learned these 5 odd decades dealing with yoga and learning about it and exploring and doing comparative studies. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm not trying to put any other teacher or commentator or authority down. I'm sort of carving out my own little niche here, but it doesn't seem to be going very, very wide at this point, but that's okay. I'm still enjoying the fact that I am doing my bit, as they used to say when I was a kid. I'm doing my bit to spread the word to the seekers. And if 100 of you see this, that's 100 more than would have had I not done this, possibly. So I'm happy. I'm a happy man. So that's that portion of it. So both coverages on the necessity of attention, whether to the unity of being, as Shankara proposes, or to the quality of experience, as I suggest. I think the quality of experience is very important in yoga. You need to experience these things. These people that say, oh, I'm enlightened, I would never, ever claim that, even if I were, because there's sort of an unwritten rule. Even if you're enlightened, by proclaiming it publicly, that shows you're not enlightened. It's sort of like a wealthy man going to a party and walking around telling everybody how rich he is, while everybody else there might be rich also. What's the point? You know, you wouldn't have been invited to the party most likely if you weren't a wealthy person. And if you're a wealthy person, what do you have to prove to anyone that has equal wealth, more wealth, or less wealth than you? You've done what you set out to do to become financially comfortable. And that's what I've done. I've tried to be comfortable. The wealth has really no meaning. I always tell the old story, the old allegory of the chickens in the barnyard, and a diamond dealer has come by, and he stopped to get a drink of water. This is in the ancient days, out of the well, and he had a little hole in his little pouch. They used to wear these little pouches along their belt. They tied them under their belts. and he had a little hole in his pouch, and the diamonds, occasionally when he was walking around the yard and talking to the farmer's wife or the farmer, and one of those diamonds would fall into the into the dirt. Well, here are the chickens out there. The wife has already thrown out the grain and the chicken feed for the day, and they're out looking for fresh food. And so, once in a while, a hen or even an old rooster, will run across one of those diamonds. This is funny to me. It may well not be to you, but it is to me. So they run across one of those diamonds, and they go, in their little chicken minds, they go, "What in the hell is this?" You can't eat it. So what good is it? And so they pass it and go on to get something that's edible and digestible. Well, this is what life is about. You can't take any of this stuff with you, folks. I told a good friend of mine years ago. We were out visiting a local gambling hub out in the out west. Let's just call it that place. Lots of lights and lots of casinos. And we were walking down the main strip one day, and an ambulance, a hearse started coming towards us. And he was a very wealthy man, by the way. In those days, I was not quite as comfortable, but he took me out there. I paid for my own trip, but we went out there as friends. And I told him, I said, "Hey, did you see that hearse?" Because he was very money oriented and very possessive, very, well, he was just cheap. I'll just say it that way. And he was always, trying to squeeze everything he could out of a nickel. And so I said, "Hey, did you see that hearse that just passed by?" He said, "Yeah, I saw it." So we're at a corner and we're waiting for the light to change. And I said, "Did you notice it didn't have any luggage racks on it?" And he looked at me and said, "What in the hell does that mean?" I said, "It means lighten up. You can't take it with you." That's what it means. Same thing with the chicken. If you can't eat it, in their minds, let it go. If you can't take it with you, let it go. The only thing, and I'm getting serious here now, the only thing you can't take with you are the eternal attributes that you learn here on earth. As a soul encapsulated in a body on earth, you learn the eternal attributes: goodness, ethics, morals, right dharma, right karma, treating your friends and family properly, morals, right judgment. Those are the things you can take with you. All these knickknacks from Walmart or Saks Fifth Avenue or the latest big diamond company, you can't take those with you. So don't put so much importance in them. Well, you can see them as investments possibly, but they're not the be all and where all of your possessions. Your possessions are those portions of knowledge that you have collected and are utilizing on a daily basis to make yourself, your world, and all your friends and family's world that much better off. Your knowledge is your greatest possession. That and your belief in the Creator. Those are two great possessions that you should never endanger or never lose. So my viewpoint is that the seeker navigating the ambiguities of life and death does make an absolute difference. Not rituals, daily belief, daily practice of the right things. The conclusion, there's a profound meditation on imperishability, consciousness, and the art of dying, and thereby living well in the author of this book, the Bhagavad Gita, and he also was contributed heavily or did write the Mahabharata, from which the Bhagavad Gita is an extract. His wisdom, his name was Vyasa, his wisdom is refracted through Shankara's clarity and my my truthfulness. And we both invite the seeker to contemplate the nature of reality and the transformative power of meditation with a laser-like focus, more so myself than Shankara on that last sentence. Whether one stands in the tradition of non-dual realization or in truthful readiness, the 8th chapter remains a beacon, a call to awaken, to remember, and to embrace the imperishable within. And there endeth the lesson, my friends, excuse me. By the way, that is royal ginseng tea I drink, and I drink it without any type of milk or sugar or anything. It's just straight tea. And I just love it. It clarifies my mind when I get ready to do these little get-togethers like we're having right now. Well, there we are. 30 minutes have passed. Can you believe it? That quickly. And I know I went off track a little bit here or there, but what the hey, liven it up a little bit. If I were teaching a class out at UT, I would not want to be some old stick in the mud just standing up there, quote, and quote myself. I mean, please. Who in the hell wants to go to those type of lectures? So here we are. Sorry I cussed a little bit, but I'm a yogi. I'm not a priest. I'm not a bishop, and I'm certainly not a pope. So I have the freedom to do that within limits, and I apologize if I've offended anyone by that. So I'm going to close with my normal closing, and that is, I'm shifting down now, shifting gears. Be good to yourself. Be good to others, including friends, family, and strangers. And the reason I want everyone to do this, because if this is practiced, say over the next 5, 10, or 15 years, then, and it spreads to a major degree, then at that point in time, we should wake up to a new edition of this world in which we're all getting along again and everyone's caring about each other again. And that's my daily hope, my daily prayer for the world. And if that does happen, we'll all be able to look at each other and say, well, isn't this the way it should have been all along? And thank goodness it's back to where it should have stayed, or it should have been all along. I know that it didn't make much sense the way I expressed it, but you get the gist of my thoughts. My thoughts are always towards the good and towards the personal. Again, I did not mean to offend anyone in my light-hearted humor or my extended vocabulary this time. And thank you so much for coming to visit. If you enjoyed it, I'm glad. If you didn't, well, that's okay too. But if you did enjoy it and you want to come back, I'll see you next time.